And here's the real problem for Kentucky. CCS is carbon capture and sequestration, the assumption that you're going to be able to capture the carbon that is emitted by burning coal. It's still going to have to go down by 25%, even if we have carbon capture and sequestration. And guess what? We don't have carbon capture and sequestration. And guess what else? If we did, it might double the cost of burning coal. That's some of the estimates I've seen. We got a lot of poor people in Kentucky. We already heard about that earlier this morning. That's going to hurt them. Remember my questions about whether or not it's going to hurt us as a state? It's certainly going to hurt poor people in Kentucky if we don't do something about it. And Kentucky doesn't have any choices here, all right? It's not a matter of whether or not we want to try and do something. We're going to get forced. They can act on the USA. European Union proposed carbon tariffs on imports. That means that if, in fact, you produce services, but your electricity comes from coal-fired plants, right, you're going to pay a tariff relative to somebody who produces the same service, accounting services, only they get their power from wind. EU backed off on it, but they don't particularly care whether they hurt the US. They were a little bit worried about third world countries. OPEC is now investing its oil revenues in alternative energy technology development. Great. So instead of importing oil from those countries, we're now going to import licenses for the technology that we need in the future if we don't invest in it ourselves. Okay, we got $50 billion in solar, $6 billion in wind in the new Strategic Energy Technology Plan in Europe. The big objection to this has been, hey, you're not giving enough to wind. Nobody's said you're giving too much to solar. And China has now announced the target of 20% of all of its energy will come from renewable resources by 2020. You know what impact that has on the Kentucky economy? What percentage of eastern Kentucky coal is consumed in Kentucky? Anybody know? About 90% of it is exported to China. Worse, she could affect the US. The she here is our dear friend Mother Nature. Disasters, natural disasters. We all know about natural disasters. Top cost on US mitigation is about 3% a year in a loss in gross domestic product. Right now, currently, natural disasters, each natural disaster, big one when it hits above a certain level, costs a country 0.6% of its GDP that year, of its output. The top cost of how much damage doing something about climate change is going to do for the US as a whole says US will have its GDP go down by 3%. 5 natural disasters equals mitigation. And natural disasters might be rising. There's also data out there about the frequency of forest fires as a function of rising temperatures. And guess who pays for the disasters in other parts of the country? That's federal money that goes in for disaster relief, paid for in part by Kentuckians. Droughts aren't classified as disasters, but we know we've had them in Kentucky. And we've had them worse in the Southeast. We almost got into water wars between Georgia and Florida. But Kentucky doesn't care about Georgia and Florida. But try this one. Coal-fired electrical generation requires that you cool the steam. Any process that relies on steam says that you have to cool the steam. What do you need to cool the stream? You need free-flowing water, sufficient drought, and you can't run the plant. One of the big slaps against solar and wind is that it's intermittent. You can't just fire it up whenever you want. When the water stops flowing, good luck. Oh, by the way, a large portion of Kentucky gets its water from a little outfit called the Tennessee Valley Authority. They rely very heavily on hydro. What happens to hydropower in droughts? So we have a problem here. Mother Nature is going to affect us whether we like it or not. And not only that, but now we've finally reached the point at which business is betraying coal. I wasn't going to get to coal until now, but you used the word, the 4-letter word, before I ever started. So, you know, now I have no problem using the word coal, Mike. Business is betraying coal. The insurance industry for about 15 years has been concerned about getting more government action on climate change. But now we have the U.S. Chamber, which is fighting the climate change legislation. Just saw new ads today. It's starting to lose members and support because of their position. This little outfit only has 13 trillion in assets, 181 different investment institutions, and they are calling on the world leaders to reach a strong post-12 climate change agreement. That's going to have real impacts on what Kentucky can do. And Kentucky, as I said earlier, is more vulnerable than most. But remember that 24% figure. I'm going to come back to it in a moment. Kentucky does have choices, however. We can do things business as usual, and we can let whatever happens as a result of that, or we can try and do something. I'm not going to get into the details of these choices. It's not worth the effort at this point, because I want to try and show you some things that might actually be done. These were just hypotheticals. And Kentucky is already a leader. You know what Energy Star is? And it's a standard for energy efficiency in buildings. We star in energy efficient schools. Most Kentuckians don't know this, but Kentucky leads the nation in energy efficient schools. And one of the interesting things about this is the next to last bullet here. The average US school uses 73 kilobTUs, 1,000 BTUs per square foot of school space. Kentucky schools that are now being rehabbed or newly built to Energy Star certification are getting under 20. All right, the average school uses 3.5 times as much power as the more efficient schools. Hate to say it, folks, but that translates into tax dollars, that translates into more dollars available to pay school teachers, more dollars available for school equipment and the like if you have more efficient schools. And it doesn't just have to be newly built schools. You see the two of the ones that were rehabbed to Energy Star standards were built in the 1940s. So there's a lot of opportunity in Kentucky. We are a leader. We also lag.